Good morning. I'm Jim Check. You're watching Kelowna Now. With me, Ian Burns, on the phone all the way from Ottawa. Good morning, Ian.
Good morning, man.
Well, big day today. Big day. We got Donald Trump speaking at the World Economic Forum. We're going to lead with that. I think Ron will jump the gun there, but we'll play that.
Just as an example, with Mexico, we're dealing with Mexico, I think, very well. And we're just, we just want to be treated fairly with other nations because there's hardly a nation in the world, and I blame this on us, and I blame it on politicians that, for some reason, I'm probably mostly it's stupidity, but you could also say other reasons, but mostly stupidity. They've allowed other nations to take advantage of the U.S., and we can't allow that to happen anymore.
Well, there you go. Not very friendly words from Donald Trump. This seems like the rhetoric is kind of like amped up, and I think the rhetoric on both sides is amped up. Everything from EB saying that he's going to charge trucks now to cross into Alaska. Hopefully, calmer heads prevail because it will definitely not be good for Canadians.
Yeah, I'm not sure the sound actually worked there for the beginning part of that, so maybe we should sort of repeat what he said, which is that Canada it's the same story really, that Canada's an abuser of America on trade. They play a very hard game, so he thinks. $200 billion apparently of deficit, which is completely false. You know anybody with access to the internet can find that that's false in seconds, but obviously he doesn't care. Then he said, we don't need Canadian lumber, we don't need their oil and gas, we don't need their cars, and if they're upset about it, they can become a state. So it seems to have crystallized now, his spiel. He's memorized it now, his little monologue of nonsense and falsehoods. But possibly the most interesting one there is that he actually mentioned oil and gas specifically again, despite all of this lobbying by Danielle Smith and also the federal government, which has repeatedly said, even just the other day, earlier this week, Trudeau said, you're going to need our oil and gas, and a direct sort of plea to the US, I think. Like, if you want to have a golden age that you keep talking about, you're going to need our oil and gas. And there's Trump saying, actually, no, we don't need it. So
He,
interesting negotiation tactic as
he,
usual from Mr. Trump, just living in his own universe of lies and
he definitely contradicts
just
himself.
weirdness. But
He
there you go.
definitely he contradicts himself because why would he want to reopen the Keystone Pipeline if he doesn't need our oil and gas? What would be the purpose of that pipeline?
Yep. And he's also, when he says, oh, we've got more oil and gas than anyone, sort of true.
Right.
Yeah, they certainly produce more. They don't have more reserves than everyone else, but I mean, who knows? Maybe they'll find more reserves. That's a bit misleading, isn't it? Anyway, as a measurement. But they certainly produce the most in the world.
I
But
listened to.
that said, they can't just click their fingers and make 4 million barrels a day
Right.
appear. They just can't do that. So they need Canadian oil and gas now. And again, with Trump, it's like, who's this for? I can't make my mind up. Who is this for? Who is that stupid and ignorant that they don't, question what he just says there? 'Cause it's so obviously false. Very interesting man. I mean, obviously he is. Everybody's interested in him, aren't they? They're sort of fascinated by him. But
Well,
what a
it's.
very strange creature he is.
I think the everybody's interested because it is the world's largest economy, and a lot of stuff is happening there. And other parts of his speech, though, he talked about energy a lot. He talked about interest rates needing to come down. Talked about manufacturing, and I'm sure a lot of the people at the World Economic Forum were definitely not like waiting to hear that speech, all the stuff that he said, because it was very protectionist for the United States of America and very much against most of the ideals that the WEF has been promoting worldwide for quite a few years. And I mean, they're losing a lot of the people, like, Javier from Argentina also spoke there too. And, he was not a big proponent for the WEF.
Yeah. Well, I watched a bit of myself, and there was quite a lot of awkward squirming and giggling, which is what people tend to do in the presence of Donald Trump, don't they? When
Yeah.
they don't know where to look or what to say or what to do, so they just sort of look at each other and smirk like little school children. It's quite feel quite embarrassed for them actually. But yeah, I mean, where this is interesting for us, it does go against a lot of what the World Economic Forum stands for, yeah, Trump's platform. How this is interesting for us, though, is that lots of our political leaders, including right now, are associated with the WEF, and that include, Carney's been there many times.
Well,
Freeland
Christie,
was
she was
kind of
actually
like,
a director there, kind of thing. She was part of the
yeah,
organization, and she scrubbed that though. She's recently scrubbed that off of there.
yep, Trudeau as well. I mean, it's an internationalist organization run by sort of utopian
Hmm.
banker types, really. That's kind of what it is. Like they're not big fans of nationalism, obviously, and
Yeah.
nor is the current crop of Liberal Party MPs and cabinet ministers. So it is a bit awkward, really, that Trump is so opposed to them because you don't really want to be on such a different page as the US when you're a country like Canada, which relies on it for almost everything.
Yeah, Klaus Schwab has highlighted Justin Trudeau as one of his ideal students. I think you remember that speech that he made there, and that he's infiltrated the Canadian cabinet as well.
He did use that unfortunate verb, didn't
Yeah,
he, with his unfortunately almost like comical German accent.
it's almost like from that James Bond movie, right? Like, uh,
Yeah.
it's pretty
Well, like Goldfinger,
diabolical
yeah.
if you listen to it in the accent and all that, and just like you're just like, what is that true? Yeah.
Yeah, well, if it is a secret conspiracy to control the world or whatever it is people say, then they're not very good at PR, are they?
And speaking of Freeland, another story out of Blacklocks. They said they hit a new low under Freeland on transparency and federal spending. From the ex-finance minister, Chrystia Freeland, the budget office says. Analysts expressed anger over concealment of financial accounts and confirmed dramatic overruns in deficit spending. I mean, this party ran under transparency and accountability, and that is the two things that they definitely never did. I don't know if they understand the meaning of the words or what transparency and accountability they were talking about, but it's been one of the toughest things to figure out the spending, and we have a whole bunch of ones where they still won't release records for in some of the overruns, including the green slush fund as they call it, and where did the money go for? And there, the accusations that Stephen Jabot's companies had been taking 200 plus million, and like the ArriveCan app, all kinds of things.
Yeah, well, and I mean the prorogations as well, both of them very controversial. But like we've forgotten the first one, haven't we? That was to dodge questions about the We charity
Yeah,
and Justin Trudeau's sort of family, wasn't it? It was his own mother. Um,
and
that
his
was
wife.
that was yeah, that was pretty. I mean, that was quite a moment, that really, wasn't it? And then but this prorogation is even more controversial than that. But it is quite sad, isn't it? Because you're right to say that he's mentioned transparency a number of times, and that was kind of like part of their platform. And that's also true actually in BC with the government of John Hogan and then EB. They've also sort of pledged to be transparent and be kind of like an open government, but unfortunately, the opposite is true. It's
Well,
they're not very open and transparent at
be,
all.
being from England, there's a Webster's dictionary. Perhaps there's a different dictionary out there that we don't have access to that has a different definition for those words.
I think Webster's is American, isn't it?
Is it?
So maybe the
Oh,
Oxford English
Oxford
Dictionary, maybe
Dictionary.
they
There you
maybe
go.
they've got a different one.
Somebody's got a different meaning for these words because they use them a lot, but they definitely don't use the meaning of those words.
Well, look, I think the Liberal Party can teach us quite a lot about English, to be honest. I think they must have like a lexicographer or whatever the word is in their party that invents new interpretations of words, such as tax, for example.
Levy, right? A levy, which in the dictionary is a tax, but according to that Liberal MP, it is not a tax. So
That's
not
right.
it's not spelled tax. It just acts like a tax.
Who needs to defend their policies if you can just redefine words so that the people criticizing you can't even speak to you in the same sort of language? You just say, no, that doesn't mean that. I've got
So
my own dictionary here.
Christia Freeland now has reversed her stand. Well, she did when she resigned. She said, or got fired, however you look at it. But she said the GST was a political gimmick. Now she says the carbon tax, she went along to get along. And now she's come out and said the capital gains tax does not make sense for Canada. These are all three of the things as finance minister and deputy prime minister. Now she's saying she doesn't want any of those.
Yeah, she's really gone hard on that. We were wondering what she was going to do, and I think she's very decisively, very strongly gone down the path of saying, actually, I completely disagreed with everything that Justin Trudeau stood for,
I think she should
but
walk
just
across the
didn't
aisle.
mention that at the time.
Walk across the aisle and join Pierre Poilievre. This basically says everything that Pierre Poilievre has been saying for the past couple of years is what the policy should be, because it seems like even the Liberals are now going over to what he's been saying.
Yep, and it's kind of it's a bit embarrassing when you see that happen from the outside. But I think, if we're going to be serious here, I think it's probably true that a lot of the Liberal MPs, a lot of the cabinet ministers, really were kind of dragged along by Justin Trudeau on a lot of these things.
Well, then they
But
have.
that isn't good enough, unfortunately. If you want to be the leader of the party, you want to be the leader of Canada, it's not good enough to say, "Oh, he made me do it." That's not what a leader does. So you're not going to win respect by behaving like that.
Especially for what the positions that Chrystia Freeland held. She didn't just hold, just a even cabinet position is big enough, but like she was the second in charge. She was the deputy PM. She can't shirk that responsibility. And also, she was the finance minister. One of the most trusted things, and that's she's basically the CFO. He's the CEO. She's the CFO of a company, the company called Canada. And she's shirking her responsibility and saying that she was kind of like, it's like saying, hey, we're going to embezzle this money and you got to play along, right? She has a responsibility to own up to it. At least apologize then to Canada or Canadians.
Yeah, and it's also really important to remember why we're even having this conversation. Why is she even in a position to try and win the leadership? It's because she resigned, and that forced the collapse of Trudeau's government. So that just goes to show how powerful she was. So
It,
theoretically, she could have brought that government down at a time of her choosing, and it took rather a long time for her to do that.
well, I mean, she's now saying she was fired. So, I mean, right, resigned, fired, or threatened to be fired on like 3 days later, and then she resigned before she got fired.
Yeah, well, I mean, she was threatened with being shuffled,
Yeah.
moved to a different job. But what I'm saying is she was the linchpin of the government, and
Yeah.
at least at that period of time. And I would argue that it actually she'd been in that role for some time, where she was like she had the power to knock Trudeau down, really,
Yeah.
whenever she felt like it. And I think that's been the case probably for about 18 months or something like that.
Yeah.
So that's another thing for her to answer. It's like you didn't agree with Trudeau, you didn't tell anyone at the time, or you didn't tell the press, you didn't say it publicly, and obviously you didn't resign. But all along, you could have done that, and you could have ended the Trudeau government, and by extension, ended all of those policies that she apparently despised. So it's a tough sell in politics. If I was advising her, I would have a very grim face on, I think, and say that your chances aren't really very, very
Well,
good if that's the path you want to walk.
you're asking for the trust of Canadians for another 4 years for this Liberal Party, and you can't even be honest with them. I think that's a tough point to come back from. Do you know what I mean? Like I said, if I was in her shoes, I would at least apologize to Canada.
Yeah, well, usually as well when a government collapses, that's especially a government that's been in power for so long, a prime minister that's been in power for so long, and when the lack of popularity is associated so strongly with an individual, in this case Trudeau, usually what the party does is elect an outsider, which is obviously what Mark Carney is laughably trying to class himself as being. But usually they would get somebody in the party that has been like outside of the clique, the ruling clique, and maybe has been in trouble with the leader, usually it would be that person they would turn to, you know. But in this case, it's not. It's all of like Trudeau's closest associates,
Yeah.
really, are the ones who are trying to say that they're gonna lead a better government. It's a really, really difficult maneuver to pull off that in politics, and I'm not entirely sure what their game is, but I feel like possibly they've they've all just accepted that they're going to lose this election, and they're not really. It's not really about this election. It's about the next one after that. Then it's about who gets to lead the opposition.
Pierre Polyev, I mean, this is a distraction, I believe. I mean, what's the most important thing that's going on in Canada right now? It's the economy, and it's the tariffs and the stuff we're facing from the United States. And then the media is wasting its time asking these questions when we need a clear direction. We need an election. I think that should be the number one story in everything. We should like election, 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 election. Not, like Donald Trump, like says something, and then what's the reaction from Pierre Polyev on that? I don't know if they asked like Mark Carney and that the same questions, but like this is filling the space where we should be talking about when is the election? When is the election?
Yeah, well, I mean, that was CTV, wasn't it? And the guy that was asking him that question, I mean, I would advise everybody to go and watch it for themselves, but I don't think his heart was in it at all. I don't think he really wanted to ask that question,
Yeah, he was
and he
squirmy at
kind of
best.
backed down.
Yeah, he was squirmy at best, and I'm sure that maybe his whatever wanted that question asked, but it's a distraction from the real question. Because what is
Yeah,
the big question right now? When is the election? And what are we going to do about these looming tariffs that could cause economic crisis in Canada? In our darkest hour in the economy, this is what we get. And this is,
yeah.
I would suggest to people just to turn that off. Like, you know what I mean? If you get that pushed out there, because the real question is, that matters to Canadians in our pockets, but we could be facing something that is very, very harmful to every Canadian. And this is what we're
Yeah.
talking about. Donald
But the
Trump's
thing is,
reactions
I
to,
can say from the inside, having been a journalist for quite a number of years, for whatever reason I chose to do that, I can tell you that this is so easy. It's such easy and high reward question to ask, because look what's happened. It's gone everywhere. It's gone out on all the big, it's all over Twitter and all over social media. It's gone out on all the big platforms. Here we are even having a conversation about it. And if you're a producer who's been in the game a while, at CDV, as it was in this case, it's a no-brainer. It's like, go on, ask him about that. That'll be awkward because, he'll not know what to say and he'll have to make something up and then it'll go all over the internet. It's just so easy to do that. So I think journalists and editors and producers at the big news companies, they need to start behaving with a bit more propriety, I think, and they need to start being a bit more responsible and saying, right, this is low-hanging fruit, this is easy, this will get us loads of hits, but is it the right thing to do? Is it actually a sensible thing to do? When we've got probably the next Prime Minister of Canada in an interview for 10 minutes, should we ask him this question right now? I mean, is that actually going to benefit
yeah,
Canadians? Is
wouldn't
that
it?
going to help our viewers? And more journalists, and particularly the senior ones, should say no to that. They should say no. It's a waste of time. Like let's ask a
Yeah, we
serious
should.
question.
The question that we should be asking Pierre Polyev, what's your plan to deal with these tariffs? What's the plan? Like, what's the plan? Anyway.
Yeah,
And here's the economy, and this is what matters, and this is how it's affecting us. The economy in Canada is basically collapsing around our ears. Here's another one. Amazon Canada closed 7 of its warehouses in Quebec in the next 2 months. And we've talked about this many times. The giant sucking sound as capital flees Canada and goes to the United States for many, many different reasons. And it's just, and this is going to happen over and over again because this government has not been friendly to business.
yeah. Well, and capital and especially in Canada, just take a walk, like go to a strip mall or something and look at how many of the companies there are American or at least not Canadian. Or just look around your room or your house at all the things you have that aren't Canadian. It's like we rely on international investment, as do many other countries,
Mm-hmm.
and it's very, very liquid, isn't it? It's very easy to move around. So if a company like Amazon doesn't like regulations in a certain country, they're just going to say, all right then, see you later.
So
I'm just going to go somewhere else where it's easier. And in the case of Canada, they can ditch Quebec and just go to Ontario or something even. It's like easy peasy, isn't it? But
yeah.
when you've got the US there as well, it's and this is happening even like even companies that you might associate very strongly with a country like in Germany, like the car makers, for example, and the chemical refineries that they have in Germany that they're so famous for. They've been presented with this hellscape in Germany where not only do they have to pay loads of taxes and everything, but they also have to pay like 5 or 6 or 7 times the cost for energy compared to the US. And they've just said, okay, then bye. Like we're going to go to Nevada or we're going to go to Arizona or something. We're not going to bother with this. And these are like very famous German companies and European companies. So that's the reality. That's the environment that we live in. So we kind of, unfortunately, we aren't stronger than these companies as a country. So we kind of have to compete for them. We have to give them what they want to a certain extent. And I know a lot of people hate that, but that really is how it works, isn't it? And the US is showing us that in Technicolor now as they suck it all out of Canada and the rest of the world.
And speaking of the auto manufacturers, this is an older headline. Canada agreed up to $15 billion incentives for Stellantis' battery plant. And guess who's leaving Canada? They announced that yesterday, Stellantis. And
I mean,
I
we
would
laugh,
say,
but it's like it's a laugh of despair, isn't it?
I would say Donald Trump just dropped the EV mandate in the United States. Canada still has the EV mandate, and our premier here in BC is a real big proponent of the EV mandate as well. I can tell you right now, if Canada doesn't drop that EV mandate, every Canadian legacy automaker is leaving Canada as well, and they're going to the US. Because why would they stay here to be punished with these EV mandates? Because they're going to have to pay all these penalties for producing gas or even hybrids at a later date for manufacturing here in Canada.
And it's per vehicle, isn't it? Like $10,000 per vehicle or something
Correct.
nuts like that.
And
Yeah, there's just no chance. There's no chance. I
we
mean, that's
already
just
have
like
only 1.7% of the auto manufacturing, and that's going to fall off a cliff here. Again, with the Liberal government has been chasing businesses away, and this is just another way for them to leave Canada. I'm an EV proponent, love EVs, drive an EV, but people deserve a choice and not be mandated into something. People need to be shown that it's cheaper, better, faster, and safer, not because the government said so.
yeah. But I mean, another way to look at this, it's almost like we're in the market for highly qualified employees or something like that. We're trying to recruit them, and we're a company, and it's like we're offering a lower wage, fewer benefits. Like our package is kind of lame in comparison to the package that the US is offering. What do you do in that scenario? I mean,
More regulation. And here in this next one here, the Toronto Sun article, Brian Lilly, as Trump unleashes America, Trudeau shackles Canada. This is exactly what you're just saying. Here we have, like Trump is saying, I'm going to like take off the regulation, give you lower taxes, and give you access to more and access to capital and everything. And here in Canada, all we do is tie up everything. It's even hard to get things done with the regulations. Never mind, even if you have the capital that you want to put into play, unless you're like some of these really big companies, you get a bunch of corporate welfare from the Liberals. Like most companies that aren't getting access to this corporate welfare are just going to leave.
sadly, yeah, because the deal is so much better in America. And a lot of the fundamentals are quite similar. Like they have quite a lot of cheap energy as well, don't they? And they also have a very sort of educated workforce and
Low
their justice
taxes.
system and so on.
So as
Yeah,
we've seen in Canada, the more that companies leave, because this is like even resource companies where you could rely on those taxes for revenues to provide the services that Canada needs to provide, then all you have left to get the tax revenues from is from the individual. So you have to
yeah,
squeeze the individual more and more and more and more, and then the businesses leave more and more and more, and then anybody with money leaves, and then you have to squeeze those people more and more and more until you get to a taxation thing. Like some people that are making about $100,000 a year here, $150,000 say a year if you to qualify for the GST credit. Like you're paying after you pay the GST, the PST or HST or whatever that you're paying for extra taxes and that, and your property transfer taxes here in Canada, all these additional taxes, like you're paying over like 65-70% of your wages towards taxes.
yeah. And with the demographics as they are in Canada, that's only going to get worse as there are more and more people that are dependent, like retired people and so on, and fewer workers. It is going to get worse.
But the Liberal Party X account keeps promoting that they took the GST for the up until February off of chips and tinsel, and that we should be jumping up and down for. That sounds like an old fable from a kingdom, right? Where the king rides through the village and throws some breadcrumbs out, and then everybody should be celebrating.
Well, the Roman Empire it became customary for every new Roman emperor to kind of throw coins at particularly the Praetorian Guard, like the soldiers, but later on, just to everyone really. It's kind of associated in some way with the collapse of the Roman Empire. But it's interesting you should mention that GST thing because Karina Gould, the kind of outside number 3 sort of candidate in the Liberal leadership race, she's just said this morning that she wants to make the GST cut permanent on diapers and kids' clothes and some other things, strollers, I think. So it's going to potentially survive a little bit longer as an idea, that tax cut, or
Yeah.
parts of it anyway.
Yeah. Again, crumbs, right?
Well, it's kind of it's a little rearrangement of the chairs, isn't it? It's not like a fundamental change in direction that she's offering there. It's just GST off a few items. I mean, that would probably go down reasonably well, but that's not gonna change the fundamentals of the Canadian economy.
And then here again, the next one here is and you did this story a couple of days ago too. It's BC now saying they could charge U.S. truckers to travel through the province of Alaska. Did they not think that a lot more trucks go the other way? We export a lot to the U.S. and we're going to start charging trucks.
Yeah.
It's where's the common sense? Where's the common sense when we keep poking, the giant next door, and then we get this rhetoric that Donald Trump spoke this morning. We had a good piece from Ted Cruz, Senator Cruz, there yesterday, where he said, "Oh, Canada isn't really going to get any tariffs; it's just posturing." And then you just keep poking the bear, and all of a sudden the rhetoric gets higher and higher and higher. We need somebody to sit at the negotiating table, and this needs to come out of X, right? X is being shown as the number 1 news platform in the world now because everybody seems to want to do their fights over X too.
Yeah, I mean, it is a little bit foolish, that, isn't it? Threatening to charge for entry through BC, because all you got to do is look at a map. Look at the other side of Canada. Yeah. Quite a lot of Canadians rely on the American road system to get from one part of Canada to another. If you're in Quebec or Ontario and you want to go to the Maritimes, just look at the map. The state of Maine, which the dastardly Americans pinched away from British North America hundreds of years ago, but it comes right up into New Brunswick and Quebec, and it's a real schlep to have to go all the way around that. So you just take the road through Maine. But that's also the case if you're in Toronto or something like that, and you wanted to go, I don't know, Kelowna. One of the better options, many say, is to go through the US, because it can be quicker to do it that way. So they can hit back in that way pretty ferociously, and I think we might end up on the wrong end of that one.
Let's listen to these words from the Environment Minister as he endorses Mark Carney, Stephen Guilbeault. We're going to play this clip here for you.
Campaign to frankly lie.
I remember doing multiple interviews with you in which you told me that politicians who cave into pressure on the carbon tax don't care about climate change. How can you now be one of them?
I'm forced to recognize that largely due to Pierre Poilievre's campaign to frankly lie and misguide Canadians, it has become very unpopular. It's not supported by the NDP. Even some environmental organization are telling me, listen, Minister, it's too unpopular. And we have other tools. Well, I mean, we obviously have the industrial component of carbon pricing.
And I guess, though, it's confusing to me because I remember putting that exact point to you again on multiple occasions. I'll read you exactly what you told me 9 months ago. If there's a measure somewhere that someone can find and point to me that will help us achieve 10% of 2030 targets at no extra cost to consumers lying around under a rock somewhere, someone needs to show it to me because I haven't seen it. Have you seen it now?
I mean, I basically have two choices here. I can stay in the party and continue help fighting to protect the environment, fighting climate change, or go pick my bags and go home.
Well, there you go. Probably a lot of Canadians would ask him to go home.
Yeah, well, there's
But
this phenomenon in politics called entryism. I don't know if you've ever heard of that, but it's where like radicals
yeah, you don't
who
need to
have an
put that one up.
unpopular agenda. What's that, sorry?
No, that's good. Keep going.
Yeah, they join a party, like a mainstream party, and they try and push their agenda from the inside and make it one of the platforms of that party. And it's kind of like Gilboa kind of, I don't know, I don't know if he's just being naive there, but he sounded a lot like an entryist there, where he was saying, well, I can leave and nobody will listen to me, or I can stay in the party and maybe I can persuade people in the party to do something that the
So
Canadian people don't really want.
there is a key message in there. There is a key message in there. He's saying Pierre Poilievre has really made, which is ludicrous, made people hate the carbon tax scheme. But they just need to repackage it and come up with something else because they have the industrial component. Do you know what I mean? It's not like they're backtracking on the carbon tax. They're just wanting to make it so they don't really realize it, or they're going to hide it under something else or do something else with it. It's not like they're saying they're going to get rid of it.
Yeah, because I think, and almost this is to their credit, I think, like they actually really believe in it, and they're not willing to just set fire to it and completely change. Like they actually really believe in it. And
Well, I mean, we could say Stephen Jabot really believes in it because according to Chrystia Freeland, she just went along to get along.
yeah, well, Freeland maybe is the odd one out, but certainly Gould and Mark Carney and a lot of the Liberal MPs and the Liberal Party as well, they really believe in this stuff. They really genuinely believe it. They think that if Canada doesn't do this, if Canada doesn't dramatically cut emissions right now, that it's going to potentially bring about apocalyptic climate situation. They really think that, even though it's not true. But they definitely think that. So in a way, it's kind of like that's one of their principles, and they're holding on to it. So it's kind of you got to credit them for that, I guess, or some of them anyway.
So this Brian Lilly retweeted this chart here that shows you all the energy projects that have been or investments that have been canceled since 2015 to 2020. A lot of pipelines.
Yeah, it's that is rather sad to look at, isn't it?
Yeah, this is
That one there going up to the Arctic, Mackenzie Valley. That could have been a very interesting proposition.
All these things would have reduced our reliance on the United States too. All the ones that go out to the coastlines or out east.
Yeah, and theoretically, it could have really softened the blow caused by Russia's invasion of Ukraine. The blow that's still being felt pretty severely in Europe and parts of Asia. Like a lot of these countries that are completely free of energy, like desperately need energy from other countries like Japan and South Korea and China. I think they would be rather happier in life right now, wouldn't they, if they knew that they had another source of oil
It seems odd. Like
or just energy.
I watch Bloomberg every day. Now the economists are talking that if we can lower the price of energy, we will lower inflation, which is like, to me, is like, okay, like we've been saying, like that's just basic common sense because energy is in everything we do. If we lower the biggest input into everything, obviously it would bring down inflation. And here it is. If you look at this thing, here's this opportunity to reduce inflation because it's increasing energy supply.
Yeah. I feel like part of me thinks that a lot of the reason, a lot of the sort of explanation of why a lot of these big dogs now have started to become pro-energy is because possibly in their own personal investments, they've realized that, particularly with AI, but sort of computers in general, they've realized that it's like all about energy, and it's like that these data centers can gobble up basically like infinite amounts of energy, and then EVs and all the rest of it, and electrification. And I
Well,
think they've realized that, like, oh, maybe we shouldn't have been,
I got it.
maybe we shouldn't have blocked pipelines.
I've got a news flash for you and everybody. Energy has always been in everything in an industrial world. Energy is the rich nations have plentiful energy, the poor nations have none. And that's just the way it works.
Indeed, and I'm saying that I think maybe a lot of these people were so naive
Mm,
that it's only entered their minds as a real um, you know, piece of reality now that they see all of these enormous companies like Microsoft and OpenAI and
yeah.
all the rest of them say we desperately need
I
energy.
think
Like
I,
10 years ago, we need it.
I think if I was the Prime Minister of Canada today, I would say, okay, Donald Trump, you don't want our energy? Great, let's get building those pipelines. Let's fast track every pipeline we can to the coast so that we can start selling our energy to the Europeans, to the Asians, to the other markets. And then all of a sudden you say, whoa, 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 right? Like we need to
Yeah.
diversify our it's absolutely necessary to have diversification. And this is the way to
And
do it.
it wouldn't just be to our benefit. It would also be to the benefit of a lot of our sort of friends and allies in Europe
The Western
and
world,
so on who,
100%.
yeah.
Yeah.
And it would probably, if it was going to be not LNG, which is like kind of an untapped jewel for Canada in a way,
Right.
because that not really much of that is exported at all from Canada. But if that was going to be what we exported to places like Germany, then they could replace lignite, like the filthiest, stupidest form of energy
Yeah.
on earth. They
So,
could
so,
replace that with our gas, which is
yeah.
much cleaner. So
So
it's
here's
like win-win.
so here's a better use of the Emergencies Act. Do that to fast track pipelines, not to dip into Canadian bank accounts and freeze them. Use the Emergencies Act to actually fast track the building of pipelines today, right? Just actually say this is what we need to do to ensure the prosperity of Canada, not to go after somebody for a $250 donation to a cause.
Yeah, and look what they've taught us, the Liberals, in that way. Like they've taught us that you can do things if there's an emergency, and that's
Yeah.
what the Americans have done. Like Trump has immediately declared an energy emergency,
Yeah.
which is laughable. America is in one of the best positions in the world in terms of energy, but he's done it anyway, and he's using that to promote, very aggressive energy policies. And also another thing that sort of Trudeau's taught us is that, although he got it very wrong, but it's that you can actually push an unpopular policy if you really believe in it, and you can like fight to the death to save it. And that's what he did with the carbon tax. Obviously, it has led to the death of his political career, but it's possible to fight for something like that as long as you really believe that it's going to work. So this is like these are lessons that the next government should learn, I think, and certainly when it comes to energy, there's a lot to apply those lessons to.
Don Martin there says that the problem with all these senior cabinet ministers promoting Mark Carney is probably you're going to get more of the same because it's going to be the same cabinet. They're all lining up there to support Mark Carney. And these are the same people that have brought us to where we are today. Heavily reliant on the United States. And now we have a huge, we're standing at an economic cliff, right? Our dollar's already showing where we're standing. And it looks worse. And these guys want to repackage, this same leadership and just tell us that it's new and improved.
Yeah, they've not accepted the basic premise of the rest of the Canadian population, which is that their policies were mostly wrong and have weakened the economy and weakened Canada. The Liberal Party does not accept that premise. I'm convinced. They think we got the messaging wrong. And if you just listen to Mark Carney, he says as much as that. Like he was asked about or actually he wasn't asked, it was during his speech when he announced. And he said, I think the Prime Minister too often forgot to focus on the economy or something along those lines. It's kind of like that's just a PR thing, really, isn't it? That's just kind of messaging. And he said the same about the carbon tax. Like it's not palatable for Canadians. So I think the Liberals still think that they're right about basically everything. They just think that it was delivered in the wrong way and that Trudeau got it wrong on a kind of human level. on a presentation level, and people started to despise him personally.
And
And that
that
was the problem, rather than the policies themselves.
and the collapsing Canadian dollar is obviously just a vibe session. You're just looking at it the wrong way.
Well, that, in their eyes, I would say, is the easiest thing in the world for politicians to blame, which is, international
Mm-hmm.
international market conditions, or however they want to phrase it. So they just say, oh,
Mm-hmm.
nothing we can do about it.
Chrystia Freeland called out for her government's past decisions to block pipelines. We can listen to this clip here, and just how they, dodged the question.
Has foregone opportunities to diversify. But to Premier Danielle Smith's point, your government over the last 9 years has foregone opportunities to diversify our market. Energy East, the Northern Gateway Pipeline, those would have expanded Canada's access to other markets, but now we are incredibly reliant on the U.S. as an export market for Canada's oil. It was in your government's determination that those products were not in the national interest, but now it's in the national interest to use Alberta's oil as leverage. Is there no culpability there?
Well, actually, I'll tell you what I say to Albertans, which is I am the minister who got the TMX pipeline built. That was a huge project. It was a nation-building project. It would not have happened without the federal government, and it is diversification. It gives us a pipeline to the Pacific, huge and more important today than ever. And I would point out the Americans have not managed to build a pipeline to the Pacific themselves. So that trade diversification is something our government did, and actually something that I personally led and that I'm really proud of, because, I knew it was an important project while we were building it, but today we need it more than ever.
So there you go. So, anytime they get criticism, they'll pull out one thing that they did, but, they kiboshed, most everything else.
But she also didn't answer the question, which she obviously never answers the question, like most politicians, or at least senior politicians. But the question was, why are you suddenly now talking all about energy? And even at the end there, she said, that it's more important than ever, like that pipeline. When have we ever heard that language from
No.
this government? It's always been something to cringe about and almost say sorry for. It's like,
Well,
I'm so sorry, trees, but we have to build this pipeline.
we shared that Karina Gold tweet the other day where, she said that we need to landlock Alberta's energy.
Yeah, she would. In the very unlikely event that she did become the Liberal leader, she would become a figure of, real hatred, I think, sort of west of Ontario.
Dan McTeague, former Liberal MP, we've interviewed before. He's saying, be careful, Canada, other than scrapping the costly and hated carbon tax, the Liberal scheme to come up with an alternative will even be more costly and upsetting. So, and he was a Liberal MP.
He was, he was a very sort of passionate, loyal Liberal, wasn't he? He served for, what was it, it was more than 10 years during the Chrétien years, and I think all the way up to Ignatieff, I think, actually. But he had like a Damascene conversion, and like some people that you meet in life, he went all in. He totally changed his mind, and then he quite rapidly said, the Liberals, it's not my party anymore. It's a different party altogether, and therefore I want the Conservatives to win. Quite an interesting guy.
Canada's digital services tax online regulation bill is a likely Trump target. Well, we can only hope so, right? And hopefully Bill C-18 is part of that.
Yeah, well, look at Zucky right there, and got the ear of he's got the ear of Trump, and also that's the chap next to Elon Musk there is Sundar Pichai, I think his name is.
Google,
he's in charge of Google. So
Yeah.
they're the two companies affected by the Online News Act, and there they are with the ear of the president. It seems like putting two and two together there, that they're going to want to get rid of the Online News Act. That's kind of like small fry for them. I think they're more concerned about like the other ones, like the digital services tax, like the Online Streaming Act and all that sort of thing. And also with Europe, because some European countries have got laws like that where they try and and rein in or tax these giant US companies, and obviously they don't like that and they don't want that.
Elon Musk also has one of the more popular platforms out there as well as X, which isn't really in there yet, but just because of its revenue that it's generating, but it likely will show up there soon. So you have Google, you have Google is YouTube, don't forget, YouTube, Google, and obviously their search engine, and then Zuckerberg is like Facebook, Instagram, and WhatsApp.
Yep. It's like all the biggest American companies, really. I mean, Tim Cook, was Tim Cook there? I mean, Tim Cook's toned it down a bit, hasn't he? I don't know if he's like setting himself up as a great friend of Trump's, but yeah, it's basically all of the big American tech companies that they're lining up. And Larry Ellison, he was there yesterday, wasn't he? Or the other day.
Sam Altman as well.
Yeah.
So you only got a couple days left if you want to throw your name in the hat, right?
No, it's today. You got till 5 o'clock today.
Oh, is it today? Well,
5 p.m. Eastern time.
Another lady.
So, like, get that $50,000.
Another lady did throw her name in the hat there today, I think, and I can't remember her name off the top of my head, but she did chuck it in there, though.
Tells you all you need to know about her chances, I would say, if you don't even know her name.
Provinces warn Ottawa slashing immigration program in half will hurt the economy.
Yeah, that's an interesting article.
Yeah.
It's like Alberta, Saskatchewan, Manitoba, Ontario, and a couple of the Maritimes, all complaining that they need more immigrants to grow their economy. Interestingly, BC didn't say anything about that.
We need more healthcare first, and we need more housing, right?
Yeah, well, this is the thing, and I was thinking with Eby, you know, he's come out a couple of times now and said that it's just too much, and he's kind of attacked the Trudeau government's immigration policies. But I think possibly the most interesting aspect of this article from CBC is that they asked Mark Miller, or they asked the immigration department for a comment, and they came back and they said we would be open to additional allocations. So in other words, more immigrants for the provinces, if they were willing to immediately collaborate with supporting asylum seekers. Because obviously, these provinces, like Alberta or whatever, they want workers. They want nurses and they want engineers. They want people that can write code and stuff like that. They want people like that to grow the economy so that it's a wealthier province. What they don't want is people who've like turned up at Roxham Road, like crossed the border from New York into Quebec and said, I want to claim asylum for whatever reason it is. They don't want those people because they know that they're not going to generate money. They're not going to make their province richer or better or anything like, well, maybe you could argue better, but they're not going to make the province richer. So Mark Miller has been trying, we highlighted this a few months ago, didn't we? Where Mark Miller said, like, we can force the provinces if we need to. We'll literally send them on like buses or planes or whatever if we have to do it. Because he's trying to share all of these asylum seekers across Canada because he feels that Ontario and Quebec, which coincidentally just happen to have the most MPs and the most voters, that they're taking too much of it on the they're taking the brunt of this. So it's quite cynical, really.
He's got his own busing program, like Governor Abbott out of Texas there when he was busing people all over the states. You speak of Roxham Road. Canada bracing for influx of refugee claimants if Donald Trump as he ramps up his deportation thing, and they've started already. And then also this, like, I think Jagmeet Singh came out and said that we should offer asylum to people that feel at risk now because of only the two genders under federal law in the United States.
Yeah, quite a lot of activist groups have come out, including the Canadian Council for Refugees, which is quite a big one. It said that we should exempt trans people from, there are rules that if you land in the US first, you shouldn't be able to claim asylum in Canada, and vice versa, because they're both classed as safe countries. But there are people saying we should exempt transgender people from that because of what Trump's orders that he signed. But I mean, well, in that article there, again, his media team has been busy because they issued a statement there. Actually, I think it was Miller himself came out and said, we've done a lot of prep and we're not seeing any evidence at all of a surge in asylum claimants just yet. But it's early days, isn't it? We really need to be vigilant on that, I think.
Yeah, and that's that next of the 5 things there. It says that its support for the Canadian government to stand very clearly behind Canada's belief in international rights, according to the Canadian Council of Refugees. And that's what we were just talking about there. So
Yeah, but it's not it's not quite as simple, I think, as a lot of these activist organizations try and make it seem, where it's like all you have to do is say yes, and then that's it. It's like it's just good. There's no negative. But that's not true. It is a balance, and I think in the US and in Europe and increasingly in Canada as well, people are starting to look at asylum and immigration in general as being a balance of good and bad. Of like, it is good to help someone feel freer and safer and wealthier and all the rest of it, on the one hand, but then on the other hand, our infrastructure is under immense strain, can't really handle it. Our economies, well, economies in Europe, Canada, and the rest are kind of weak right now. It's a tough time, and there comes a time maybe where you have to say no to
yeah,
people,
I mean, if
and
you could
that's
just
the conversation that we're going to have, isn't it?
you could simplify it by saying, like, your house that you live in, you could say, you could take on, 4 guests, probably pretty, you could probably make do, might be a little tight. But if somebody said, hey, Ian, we're moving 400 people into your house, it becomes chaos.
Yeah, absolutely. And I mean, even if you think about just like your little your area, even like where your kids go to school or where you go to see a doctor if you're lucky enough to have one, it's like even if you just inject 500 people or something into that situation, all of a sudden everything stops working, and you just keep being told, oh, there's a waiting list.
Yeah.
That's just another way of saying things don't work anymore. Sorry.
So the Liberals have made Danielle Smith the #1 villain. Here's her expressing her thoughts back. You gonna play that clip there, Ronald? There we go.
Clear about why we find ourselves in the situation that we're in today. It lands 100% at the feet of Justin Trudeau, who even just a few weeks ago gave a speech where he thought it was an affront to women that Kamala Harris didn't win. We're in a trade negotiation with a brand new administration, and we have a prime minister who keeps on poking his finger in the eye of the current administration and has damaged that relationship. So if there's a failure, it lands at his feet, which is why I'm counting down the days to when he's gone and we can have a reset. It's 47 days to go, and I hope he doesn't continue torching the relationship in the meantime. All I can do is try to repair and build relationships that should have been repaired and built over the last 4 years. That is what we do by having our office in Washington. We have good relationships with people on both sides of the aisle, because that is what diplomacy is. You have to be able to work with both Democrats and Republicans, and you have to refrain from expressing a preference for who you would like in the White House. And so if there's a failure of leadership, and if there's a damage to the relationship, it's 100% at the feet of Justin Trudeau.
It reminds me of when you have a toxic friend and you have to keep phoning your other friend to say, hey, just calm, like it'll be fine. You got to keep trying to like soothe them as, like that other person starts to, try to, ramp up the toxicity. It sounds like that's what she's talking about, right?
I would object though. I mean, I think she's being very disingenuous there to say that Trudeau's the one that soured the relationship. I mean, maybe in an abstract way you could say that, but it's Donald Trump that's chosen to insult Canada and Canadians and to behave like a hooligan. It was definitely Donald Trump that decided to do that, not Trudeau.
I mean, we could go back further and we could talk about how Trudeau has used Trump's name as a slur on Polyev for the past 3 years while Trump has not been in office. Trump definitely amped up the rhetoric now, but definitely Trudeau has been using it for the past 3 years.
That's accurate. That's right. But Donald Trump hasn't responded in kind, has he? And just and used Trudeau's name as a bad word. He hasn't just done that anyway.
Well,
He's attacked the whole country, and he's threatened to annihilate Canada economically. That's a different fish altogether. It's not the same thing, and obviously Danielle Smith knows that, but for her own reasons, she's pandering to a certain group of people. But I think she is right, though, when she says, I blame this in a very abstract, general way. I think she's right when she's saying this is entirely the fault of Justin Trudeau. To an extent, I think a rational person can agree with that because Justin Trudeau's been in power for 10 years. He's overseen the Canadian economy in that time, and during that period, we've become ever more reliant on the United States. And he didn't seem to have a plan B. He didn't seem to think, what if the Americans turn on us, as they've done? So in that sense, you could say, yes, it is his fault because he didn't move us away from the US, from dependence on the US.
Let's move to markets when we talk about the economy. Gold continues to just chop in that range. But again, like it looks like it wants to challenge that $2,800 mark. But again, that remains to be seen if it breaks out past that. Crypto, again, just bouncing around, bouncing in that area. But it looks like it definitely wants to move higher. That's, that he did announce crypto as being one of the things that he wants in his speech to the WEF, saying crypto will be a part of the platform in the United States going forward. So again, the wins are in the sales of the Bitcoin. The Canadian dollar looks like it's finding a base there at least. Definitely looking for direction. I'd say an election would definitely help the Canadian dollar in a clearer path. Like I said, you want to use the Emergencies Act for something? Do it to start building some pipelines to access our coastlines and accessing markets, and send somebody over to the Europe and start making deals with the Europeans on LNG and different things. Start signing some deals today.
Yeah, I mean, what is the actual? What's the language of the Emergency Act? It's something like an incident or an event or something like that threatens the integrity of the Canadian nation or something along those lines, isn't it? It's kind of like,
in my mind,
you could probably claim that this is extraordinary enough.
Not a bunch of truckers honking their horns and whatever they were doing with bouncy castles and stuff like that. I would say that didn't, and that that the court said that didn't meet the test. But I would say this would meet the test.
Yeah, so I've just had a look at it now, and it's extraordinary temporary measures to respond to public welfare emergencies, and then it lists some other things, and then also war emergencies. I mean, yeah, actually, why not? I think that could apply. I think you could actually say
I think
that this is appropriate.
Maybe we should just be quiet about it because he might invoke it, and that way he can stay in power for the next 5 years.
Well, yeah, or you could say the climate emergency is so grave that I have to now be in power forever and increase the carbon tax by like 100 times.
In markets, we did see yesterday that SoftBank CEO Massa, along with Larry Ellison and Sam Altman there, talked about a $500 billion investment into the United States. And now the Saudi Crown Prince says the kingdom intends to invest $600 billion in the U.S., and Trump said in his speech that he wants $1 trillion from him. I mean, I don't know, like for the Saudis, like $1 trillion here, $1 trillion there, is like you're probably pulling a couple quarters out of your pocket. But yeah, it's more money into the U.S. though, right? So.
Well, if you want your returns, and they certainly do, because they're thinking about how are they going to stay afloat when the oil runs out, or when people stop needing oil. And, it's a clever bet, isn't it, to go to the US, the world's most dynamic economy.
One of the other things he said in his speech, which was interesting, because under Joe Biden, the Saudis, I mean, they had started siding with Russia, right? I don't know if you remember that they were actually going to join the BRICS nation. And they had been ramping down their oil production, which kept energy prices high. Trump says he wants oil production higher. So he's not, like, he says in one word that he doesn't need Canadian oil, he doesn't need this, doesn't need that. And then he's saying he wants more oil from the Saudis.
Yeah. Right? Well, the Saudis, I think, when they spat their dummy out and started to cry about joining BRICS and all that kind of thing, I think they're terrified that the Americans are going to lose interest in the Gulf and stop protecting them as a client state. So I think that was part of their negotiation. They were basically saying, if you're not going to protect us, then we're just going to go off with these bad guys. But it is interesting. I mean, obviously, yeah, as we've said before, the Americans produce the most oil in the world right now, and I think number 2 might be the Saudis, actually. So it's kind of like, it's a no-brainer that they would want to work with them, especially considering the Americans, and we have to say it again, they can't just click their fingers and make millions of barrels of oil appear every day. It takes a long, long time. So they're going to need the Saudis, just like they're going to need the Canadians.
I know this is a longer show, but we've got something really good at the end, and we've got a really good meme today that kind of highlights a lot of stuff we've been talking about. But let's move on to the EV section. Cadillac announced the Lyric V as the 615 horsepower high-performance electric SUV. There you go. So if you want a fast-moving SUV or electric one, you can get the Lyric. And for maybe right now they might make them in Canada, but with this, the way it continues, we probably won't make any cars in Canada.
Let's hope not. Let's hope that doesn't happen.
Here's some really, I think, bad news, and this has to do with our dollar. Tesla raising the prices effective February 1st. Model 3 is going up $4,000 to $9,000 depending on the trim of the vehicle. Model Y is going up $4,000. Model S and X going up $4,000. So you're saying if you wanted to buy a Tesla and you want to save some money, because the EV credit, remember that one too, left because they said, oh, we're going to probably discontinue it, and then the next day they're just like, yeah, there's no money. So it's gone. Just
look at the date there as well. Does that sound familiar?
February 1st?
Yeah, that's when Trump's going to tariff Canada.
Right. Yeah, there you go. And then this is we got a tweet here to play, just showing you what the new Model Y is. A lot of people were waiting for the new Model Y. Just showing what the new Model Y. They're delivering the first ones to showrooms in China because they're building them in Shanghai there. So they're going to start, obviously they're going to ramp up the Gigafactory in Texas here to start building them too. And then they do build them in Giga Berlin as well. So there's your front end of the Cybertruck thing. And then here's our meme. This ends at this. It's quite a long show today, but lots and lots to talk about, obviously, and a lot of stuff that remember. And there's our giant energy beast, the Canadian giant energy beast, shackled. Looking to break.
I'd say there are a couple more culprits that aren't named there, but that sort of matches a lot of people's perspectives of what's holding Canada back, I'd say. Yeah.
And I will say this over and over and over again. Canada, even contrary to what the United States claims, Canada is the richest resource nation in the world, second and largest landmass. And it's not just oil and gas, it's LNG, it's our agriculture, it's our mining and minerals, it's our uranium in Saskatchewan, it's our potash. Canada has so many good things. And if you started to list them off and you say, okay, like we've had this softwood lumber fight with the Americans for a long, long time, right? But there's a lot of stuff that we have that they just can't replace anywhere else, right? So
yeah, maple syrup, top of the list.
Maple syrup and ketchup, yeah, no. But we are a resource nation, and it is time to unchain the beast.
Yeah. Well, I think of all those things that are listed, prorogation at the minute is the big boy, isn't it? That's the one that transcends political
that one
parties.
Would be the one. It should be around the neck. It should be like choking Canada right there. Prorogation.
Or around the eyes, blinding Canada. So I can't see, can't act.
It is allow Canadians to have a voice. Like allow Canada have a voice and determine its own destiny instead of being held hostage by the Liberal Party, which is acting very selfishly right now.
You could even say not even just the party, but like a handful of people within it who hold the power within that party, because you have to remember, like, that liberal voters and Liberal Party members, they don't really have a say in this. It's really just a small group of people.
Yeah, and then they're backing off from all their policies. I mean, it's just it shows complete. And I doubt once they get back in, if they do get back in, that they would change. You know what I mean? It sounds like they're basically just want to repackage stuff because they blame it all on Pierre. I don't understand how that works. How he's the one that ruined the carbon tax, not the doubling and quadrupling of the carbon tax and the crippling compounding tax that has driven inflation. That's not the problem.
Pierre must be like some kind of dark wizard. He's cast a spell over Canadians and he's somehow manipulated Canadians into disliking the carbon tax. And then maybe we should investigate that.
And same thing for media by cutting off our access to the social media platforms, Facebook and Instagram, and then making some outlets beholding to the government for handouts to survive, and then forcing other ones out of business. And is again, our job is to hold power accountable, and it's tough to do when you're either A, not funded because they took away your audience, or B, they're the ones signing your paycheck.
Yeah, and see, a lot of the people that you have to compete with are getting that government money, and they have that kind of revenue stream.
They're funding our competition while they choke us off. No different than the energy beast here.
Yep. And, you know, it looks like the Americans are against it. We know that already. Now the American government is against it. Obviously, the big companies are against it, the oligarchs, and also Pierre Poilievre's against it. So, and so are other parties, actually, not just the Tories.
One of the things that the new administration has said down there, any censorship will be met with like lawsuits and different things, like censorship, which was under the Biden administration. They even made a arm of the government called, what was it called? The misinformation and disinformation, like watchdogs.
Yeah, wasn't it Disinformation Czar, which was quite an ironic title to give to somebody whose job it was to censor things.
The decider of facts, right? The decider of facts.
And it was, I mean, I kind of feel a little bit sorry for her because she kind of, you know, nobody deserves that, I don't think. But she was just a young woman who just had no real experience of doing anything. Just one of these people that floats around in Washington, D.C. And she was given command of like censorship. She was made like chief censor of the United States. Absolutely bananas. And she didn't last very long though.
There's a saying, everybody's somebody's useful idiot. And then she obviously played that role. And, you know, like, obviously we're somebody's useful idiot as well. And everybody's somebody's useful idiot.
Yeah, I guess so.
Anyway, that's it for today. Energy, 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 energy. Unchain the beast. Let's have an election. How's that?
That's the only way that we can fight against the big orange beast, isn't it?
It is, for sure. We definitely need an election. That's what the talk should be every time when somebody tries to distract you. I used to coach girls, and we won a lot, and we won a lot of championships because I always said, stay with the focus. Don't get distracted. Don't get distracted by other things they'll throw at you on the ice or different places. Just stay with the mission. And the mission right now is get an election. Let Canadians speak.
Yeah. And that's, if people want further reading, that's what Dan Arbas, MP for, or one of Kelowna's MPs, has said in his column. He said that, echoing Pierre Poilievre, that it's absolutely essential that we get a parliament back.
Yeah. I mean, the key thing when people start talking about other nonsense, just say election first, and then we can talk about the others. That is the number one priority, and it is an emergency type priority. It is not like we can get to it. It's an emergency type priority. We need a leader, whether that's Mark Carney, Chrystia Freeland, Karina Gold, or whoever that other Liberal that's put their name forward, or Pierre Poilievre, or Jagmeet Singh for that matter. Somebody needs to assume the leadership, because right now we don't have a leader. We have a prime minister that is distasteful to everybody and that has already actually resigned, but acting still as the prime minister because, you know, like I've seen him running around in some school again, shaking hands like he's a rock star. He definitely is living in a different world.
Yeah, he's not going to get to do that anymore, is he? Unless he becomes the head of some sort of charity, maybe. That might be his destiny.
Well, Chrystia Freeland scrubbed her name off the WEF, and Klaus Schwab likes him, so maybe there's a position there for him in the WEF.
Yeah, as long as he can live in Tofino, I think he might. Maybe he'll open up the Tofino branch of the WEF.
I think Switzerland might work for him too. Switzerland's a beautiful country, actually. Anyway.
Yeah, it is, yeah.
It is a beautiful country. It's very much like the Okanagan. There, you know, there's a big lake there and everything, so very beautiful. Anyway, with that said, we appreciate you watching Kelowna Now. We appreciate any feedback or thoughts you have. So again, thank you for watching Kelowna Now, and we'll see you tomorrow.
We don't just report the news. We live here too. We're your neighbors, bringing you stories that matter to all of us. No government funding, no outside influence. Kelowna Now, local, independent.